Hi, I'm Antonio Centeno. I'm the founder of Real Mint Real Style. Today I'm going to be giving you 7 tips on how to properly make online introductions. Now, this is not to be confused with making in-person introductions. Some of the rules will apply, but some of the ones we're using here for online purposes are a little bit different, so I wanted to be ultra specific. I will link to and I will do an article and video on proper in-person introductions here a little bit later this month. So, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you don't miss any of these videos. I'm going to be putting out a lot here over the summer and this winter, and I want to make sure those are delivered to you. In addition, we put out these little ghost videos which disappear like a ghost, and the only way to get those is to be a YouTube subscriber. That way you get the link delivered right to your email and you can follow up with it later. Otherwise, you'll never see it, and I guess you'll just miss that information. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the 7 tips. Now, have you guys ever had a poor introduction made online? I know it's happened to me quite a few times, and I get a lot of email, at least a couple hundred emails a day. I've got an assistant, she helps me out, she goes through and she cleans out, but introductions are something that fall on me, of course, and they rightly should. But when I'm going through and I'm looking at some of these, sometimes I get an email and I just don't have time to read it. I'm like, this is like 1,000 words, and was it an introduction, or were they simply telling me what am I supposed to do? So in the 7 tips today, I'm going to hopefully help you not only make great introductions, but maybe pass this on to people that you know maybe you need a little bit of help here. So the number one thing when making an introduction is it even wanted? And this is something that you're going to have to get better at, and maybe the first time you're making introductions to a person, you may want to ask them, is it okay to make the introduction? After that, and they say, hey, make introductions with me anytime I trust you, then go for it. But first off, make sure that that person wants to be introduced to anybody. I have friends and I know people, I wouldn't call them hermits, but I would say that they have so much opportunity coming their way. They honestly are very hesitant about having introductions made, especially when someone approaches me and they want me to introduce them to this person. It's something I've got to be pretty careful. And I do go back to people occasionally. I just let them know, hey, that person has asked me not to make introductions. They're just that they would rather you go through other channels, or in a sense find a different way, but I'm sorry. And it's tough. I would love to introduce everybody to everyone in my network, but then that kind of dilutes the value a bit. So again, number 1, make sure introductions are wanted. Number 2, make sure the introduction is useful. Sometimes people have made introductions with me to somebody else, and I'm not even in their business. I don't even know how. I mean, it's great to get to know people, and I have random meetings that happen occasionally, but if it's a business introduction, you really want to make sure that it's going to be of use to both parties. If it's only of use to one party, then it's not really a symbiotic relationship. That's called a parasitic. No, I'm joking. It's not that bad, but you really need to make sure and think of, okay, is this person open to possibly mentoring people? Are they open? Do they have the time to actually spend time and to give? Because that conversation is probably going to be a 30-minute to 1 hour, one-way conversation of giving. So is this person open to that? Are they going to look at this as, wow, I really don't have time for this, but because I like the person that's making the introduction, I'm going to try to do it. I've fallen into those situations, and I try to help out people when I can, but I do find out that sometimes introductions are not very useful. So I try to always make any introduction I do useful. That was number 2. Now, number 3, be respectful. So this is something, whenever you're making an introduction, make sure to use the proper name, and there's a proper order that you should actually make the introduction. This stems off of in-person introductions. So these rules apply when you're meeting people in person, and I believe that they do and can be used online. So number 1, always, if you've got someone who's a newbie in an industry, somebody who's just starting off, and you want to introduce them to an industry leader, always introduce basically the person just starting off to the industry leader. If it is someone that, they're really at about the same level, but one has been in it for quite a bit longer, then the person that's older be respectful to them, and actually introduce them to the younger person. And it may be, you know, in my case, I get introduced to people that have been riding in men's style for decades. And in that case, even though I may have a larger online influence, I realize, hey, I'm going to show respect to this person. A great example is whenever George Bush and Bill Clinton were flying over. Have you guys heard this story? Really great story. So there's only one bed in Air Force One. Which president is going to sleep in the bed? Both are presidents, both are former presidents. And Bill Clinton actually deferred to his elder, and he gave the bed to George Bush and said, sir, you know, you got a few more years on me. The bed is yours. But I think that is just such a great example of it doesn't matter where you're at. Always look and try to defer. Now, traditionally, men are introduced to women. This is the rule that's been around for a while. You can argue with it. You guys can tear it apart in the comments, maybe say why this rule is outdated. But if you have nothing else to go on, oftentimes introduce the man to the woman. So again, showing respect. That's a big rule. Okay, so number 4 is use the right name. Now, I've got a friend. I knew him in college as Andy. Now he goes by James. And it's funny, every time I go down to Austin, Texas, we're out and I make this mistake and I try to introduce him as James to people, but I will slip if I've had a drink and I will start calling him Andy. And people just kind of get that perplexed look because why are you calling James Andy? And Andy is basically, it's a family name. It's something he had when he was a kid. For me, in my house, I'm called Tony. And I think it was always interesting because I get emails from people and they call me Tony and they don't know me. For me, my professional name is Antonio. And I changed to that because I really I felt it just sounded better. It looked better. Pops up earlier in the alphabet, which can be good for search engine optimization terms. Makes me sound Italian, which if anyone has followed my videos, I'm actually half Mexican, but I'm not going to argue. If someone in the clothing industry wants to think I'm Italian, Italians get a higher level of prestige. So I go with Antonio, but understand if you're making the introduction, use the right name for the person. Don't use nicknames. And make sure it is spelled correctly. That's one thing that people really zero in on. I get people that call me Anthony. I get people that call me Antonia. But yeah, I've had some really strange spellings of my name. Make sure the name is, double check this. Make sure the name is spelled properly and that you're using the right one. So number 5, the contact data. Make sure that you're sharing accurate contact data. I've had people make an introduction and give me the wrong email. And this is related to number 1. But don't give away contact info that the person doesn't want to be publicly known. So some people have phone numbers that they don't want anyone to know it. Maybe they've got a personal email that they don't want anyone to have access to it except a few select friends. And so pay attention to those details. Make sure you're sharing the correct and the requested contact information. Number 6, keep it short. Now, I was talking about this at the very beginning. I've gotten introductions that are incredibly long. I don't have time to read this. Really respect the person's time. Put together a one-line introduction. Think of why is it relevant. And you don't need to put their bio. I don't care what college they went to. I don't care what they studied when they were over in Europe. What I care about is how is it relevant to me and why are you doing this? You can do that usually in one sentence. Number 7, okay, you want to let them know that the ball is in their court. Oftentimes, I'll see people, come back. It's kind of unsure as to what to do next. Just simply take the bull by the horns and say, okay, guys, you guys have it from here. I'm out of the conversation. You could say that's kind of a casual way of saying it, but I don't necessarily need to be CC'd on everything that you guys are going to have going forward. So you can just excuse yourself out of that and just say, it's up to you guys. And then, hey, where it goes, it's up to them. All right, guys, those were my 7 tips. Hopefully you found them useful. And like I said, we'll be covering more. Now, if you haven't subscribed to my email list over at realmenrealstyle.com, you want to do that because I'm constantly putting out great, solid information on how men can become better men. We're talking about not just style, we're talking about men's lifestyle in general. So I'm going to be giving you guys business tips. We're going to be talking about grooming, a lot of other things, which you've probably found my website because you were looking for something with clothing. That's the bulk of our information. But we're making a subtle shift to cover more about life and style. All right? Take care, guys. I will see you in the next video. And if you've got some questions or comments, leave them down below. Take care. Bye-bye.